Everything you do and think is controlled by others. Everything you buy, your work, your beliefs, everything is a part of a false reality created to control you. Humanity has no idea it is in fact caught in a massive lie. It is trapped by its own inner desires and follows the will of those in power. Society is a mirror of man, and society is a lie that is far removed from our natural origin. Every country on this planet is being oppressed by clever and powerful elite groups that have been building their empires for centuries. They feed us lies and we believe. Eventually, we become so deluded we can no longer even see it. But there are some who can still see clearly and understand that we live in the ultimate grand delusion. This film is the result of an awakening. It is the same awakening to the self and to the wonder of the cosmos that has driven thinking men and women for generations. It is the same awakening that has been the generative cause and effect of religion and belief. It is the same awakening that has caused man to revolt against the same. It is the awakening that has been written, painted, sculptured, symbolized, and placed into music for thousands of years. This opening up of the mind to the potentials of the human spirit has been known ever since man began to think. And yet, now in the 21st century, man has created more chains to bind himself than at any point in human history. Humanity has created layer upon layer of delusion to control each other. We have declared fantasies to be realities. We have given godlike control to dictators and power to so-called special bloodlines. All of this and more is the grand delusion we live in from birth to death. Do you want to be free? Then keep watching. From the very beginning, man has sought to free his mind from the constraints of a consciousness that seemed to bind him into a world divided. The animals around him followed natural cycles and marched thousands of miles in tune with the breath of the earth, the phases of the moon, and the warmth of the sun. Man pondered these remarkable phenomena because he was now aware of it, and his awareness gave him the need to explain. Without explanation, everything seemed strange, and he therefore feared it. What man did not understand, he could not control, and lack of control and understanding meant simply one thing: chaos. The consciousness of the mind needed order to survive, and so he began to form structures within his thoughts for all themes. He gave symbols and words to everything that previously didn't need them. The bird didn't care that it was a bird. The fish just were, and the lions were boss in their domain. The mind of man came along and gave them all names and forced them and himself into ordered boxes. This simply led to constraint as man began to form his own prison. He made names for leaders, gave them wonder and awe. He created gods and deities and worshipped them. He ordered his tribe and family structures, and at the end of it all, he had developed dogma, doctrine, and rules and regulations. He had cleverly managed to tie himself down. Man had made a world of control, and he had no understanding of what he had done. Now, thousands and thousands of years later, our ordering of everything has created a seeming chaotic mess, the direct opposite of what he had intended with our conscious mind. The animals, without self-awareness and higher consciousness, still have their natural and orderly lives. They do not fear nor have material objects. They just exist. They, like all things natural, find balance. We, with our millennia of striving to order our lives, have created chaos, and now billions of people are messed up and seeking reconnection to nature. The reason for the failure of our attempts is simple. We are out of step with nature. The route to our own nature is to be found in the unconscious world of the mind. For in there our true self resides, hiding like a lost child. We are not aware of this because we are unconscious of it. It's that simple. Our conscious mind is almost an unnatural thing in that it fights with nature because of fear. We all know that we are born and that we die. We know that we exist, and so we therefore have a personality. We are individual. This individual is precious to us because we believe it is us. The fear comes when we realize that this individual will one day die, and so it is not the fear of death itself, but the loss of the self. We have created wondrous, imaginative answers to this problem by explaining to our own minds that our body is not really us and that it is simply a container carrying the self. When this container withers and rots, the true self or soul shall carry on after death and be transported to heaven, nirvana, or any other amazing realm perceived and fashioned by our ancestors. If we were nothing else, we are certainly creative. It is a triumph of consciousness, a prize of logical thought, that in the first place we became aware of our own frailties, and then discovered that it was all just a minor test on the road to St. Peter's pearly gates. Today, in the 21st century, as the old-fashioned concepts of religion are constantly bombarded by new, empowered free thinkers and science, we are finding new ways of explaining our lot. For the fear of the nihilistic mind is still one that strikes a discord, even in the mind of the most erudite brain. Anything from cloning to freezing our bodies to superior alien minds and quantum oneness are trumpeted out for our choosing. From the physical to the metaphysical, like the shopping malls of downtown LA, we can choose an answer that suits our own personal life, peer group, and sense of right and wrong. The driving force, regardless of century, is still the same: fear. It seems that no matter how high we climb on the awareness ladder, the same driving force in the consciousness arises, and the same forces of nature surge beneath the surface in the unconscious realm. If the animals move and are driven by the forces of nature, something hidden within our unconscious world, then we as conscious and confused beings are at odds with this drive. It is a drive hidden in the dark world of the mind. the part we can no longer access with ease, and it is something that we seemingly cannot control. Because of our disjointed life with the unconscious world of nature, we fear it. Fear is now so complex that it is a paradox of our so-called ordered society. But we need to strip away all the myriad excuses we come up with to replace the word fear and realize that it all revolves around the loss of self. It is in fact the sickness at the heart of consciousness, and overcoming this one core principle will set you truly free onto a road without delusions. The reason? Because we create delusions to escape it, and the marketing men of the world use every chance they can to get to pull finely woven threads from our fears and form webs that trap us. If you overcome fear, then you will realize that your life has been spent in a web created from your own emotions. All forms of fear are ugly and create ugly offspring. Fear breeds and breeds. It spreads from you to your children. It evolves and transmutes. It creates prejudice and hatred. Fear is constantly used to manipulate our thoughts, our purchases, our votes, and our wallets. We need only watch the television commercials to see how fear is used to control our actions. Listen to politicians and you will hear words and phrases that demonize the enemy and scare us into voting the right way. But we only have ourselves to blame for handing over the control of our minds to this fear factor. We need to take back control. These are our thoughts and nobody else's. The only way to freedom is through personal integrity and honesty, not with anybody else, but with ourselves. If we are not truly honest with ourselves, then we are simply creating yet more illusions to overcome. If we know that we are deluding ourselves by going to church on Sunday or buying happiness during retail therapy, then we add guilt and confusion on top of fear. We all do this most of the time, and this is why life inside the mind has become so complicated and why we have come so far away from nature itself. Half of the problem is the evolutionary childhood drive to learn. Misunderstanding this process, or not even realizing it is there, has caused immense trouble. You see, as we grow, we have a built-in drive to learn, and this can cause a slight inferiority complex. We suddenly realize that we do not know as much as our parents, and so we feel inferior. As long as the knowledge is useful, valid, and valuable, then it is fine. But if the knowledge is worthless and even poisonous, then we are in effect poisoning our mind. Adding the personality of the parent or teacher or other influence is yet again distancing us from who we are and our connections to nature. This drive continues with us even past childhood and is yet another evolutionary drive utilized by the marketing man. A simple example is to take a screen hero, let's say James Bond. We go to the cinema and watch this brave, handsome, and intellectual man save the world. We admire these things, so we try to emulate them, to take on a Bond persona. In the 1950s, many females did the same with Doris Day films. In fact, none of these characters were real. Doris Day was acting, and Bond is the creation of an alter ego by the writer Ian Fleming. who drank and smoked himself to death at an early age. The point is that we attempt to copy or mirror an ideal that is itself flawed because it was created by a human mind, and so we fall short, as we all must. This leads to yet further elements of inferiority and lack of self-worth. A great many neuroses and psychological problems are caused by lack of understanding of this evolutionary drive and the parents' inability to see this and teach or train accordingly. Never in the history of man has there been a perfect time, so we need not seek out a sunken Atlantis. Never in the future of mankind will there be a perfect civilization. So we better not sit and wait for Star Trek to fix things for us. No one religion is perfect, for all fall short of the glory they call God. No state can create the ideal place to live. No family is flawless, no friend wholly committed. We are the best thing we have. We have to live with ourselves while others can run away from us or lock us in a room. We will be in that room with ourselves, and so that is where we must find the truth, and that is where we must discover balance and harmony. Listening to the world of man will simply confuse our minds yet further. Listening to nature, which has perfect balance and indeed is powered by the force of balance, is the right place to go for help. We must return to the garden. This is an economic world. Whether you live in the so-called democratic West or the communist East, it is structured around money, and anything that gets in the way of the machine is more often than not moved or eradicated. There is no room for anything to oppose this. Each of us is in the system, whether we like it or not, and we believe there is often precious little we can do about it. But how did this all begin, and who was the originator of the system? In the beginning, mankind was nomadic. For a period so long that it staggers the mind, we traveled along coastlines, around lakes, and traversed river systems. We simply could not travel across land because most of it was covered in trees and vegetation. We did so purely to hunt and collect foodstuffs, and then returned to our boats. This is the way mankind evolved his mind over vast periods of time. But how is man able to navigate over the sea? This is an open question and is the subject of much debate. He certainly watched the stars, sun, and moon. He placed markers along the way, but he also had a natural homing mechanism, a sense of direction, now mostly lost to us to the confusion of the modern society and modern mind. There are many scientific test results which confirm that man does have the ability, probably via his pineal organ, to judge direction intuitively. This ability is due to the electromagnetic energy of the Earth and the magnetic connection between it and the pineal organ within the brain, in exactly the same way that a bird uses magnetite within its pineal organ to pick up the Earth's electromagnetic resonance. In short, mankind has connection to the world around him, and this is just one way in which we were more in tune with our environment. Today, we can't find our way around a city block without using our mobile phone. But we were once in tune in other ways too. We were in tune with our needs and nature's larder. We followed herds as they migrated. We knew which plants were safe to eat, and we only took what we needed because we simply could not carry an overabundance of produce. All the anthropological evidence reveals that mankind was more peaceful and even lived longer lives than his later descendants who would settle down. Populations grew and nomadic cultures began to partly settle down. These settlements were probably originally staging posts for extended stays during winter or such hard times, but eventually inertia set in. Remaining in one location for extended periods brought with it all manner of problems. Firstly, it brought the need to cultivate the land and to store provisions because the animal larder would carry on moving and natural vegetation would carry on and follow the seasons. Secondly, it brought disease because of human and animal waste and all kinds of other filth. And thirdly, it brought strife in ways that the nomadic smaller groups would not have foreseen. These settlements would be attracting more and more people into one single location, forcing people together for longer and longer periods of time in cramped and rapidly unnatural environments. Mankind was growing apart from nature and had to learn a whole new set of skills, from building to being more socially oriented. Structures of wood and structures of society brought with them hierarchy and alpha dominance in a different way to the previous nomadic lifestyle. Groups were now bigger, and so conflicts between those who would be in dominance would have been more frequent. But it was too late. The old ways were rapidly being forgotten. It is amazing how quickly the skills of the past generation can disappear. For example, today there are people who do not even know how to cook because their lifestyle has never called for the skill. We are constantly battling the balance between the income stream and the spending stream, and we find very little room for such trivial matters as cooking, let alone time for our children. But cooking is only one of the many skills that we are losing due to mass production of ready-made meals and lifestyle habits. Eventually, our newfound settlements had to find ways to deal with their new social problems, and the mind of man has a unique tool for the purpose: imagination. Man developed from within his own imagination new social structures of tribal leadership, and those who had maintained our learned new skills important for the group would become dominant. These were not always the strongest and best fighters or hunters, but more often than not, who knew how to heal and gel the community. We call these people medicine men, shaman, and laterly priests. As the Old Testament so eruditely informs us, it was the priesthood who would guide the people and even crown kings. The royal family of England is still to this day crowned by the Church as a direct result of this same ancient power structure uniting religion and state. With this new advent of power came many new ways of manipulating and growing masses who were herded into the new imaginative religious structure and given rules in the form of dogma, doctrine, and tradition. Now power was from the gods, and nobody could argue with such imagined power. The knowledge of navigation of the stars, of the seasons, and of course the reality of the mind of man became powerful tools in the armory of the Church. To know the seasons enabled the priest to appear magical and in touch with God. To know how to read the stars for navigation enabled the tribe to trade and invade. To know the mind of man allowed the priesthood to manipulate and control. All of this was truly a powerful knowledge. This knowledge was passed down within the brotherhoods in symbolism, laterally in texts, and certainly in tradition. Tradition is not simply something we imagine our grandparents had. Our English term tradition comes from traditio, a Latin word meaning delivery of doctrine and surrender. But more pertinent to us, it means something handed down. Tradition is the continuance of something profound. In the very first usage of the word, we find that it was in fact used for the passing on of doctrine and religious dogma, a sacred act itself and something which became symbolic. The word sacred comes from the Old Latin saceres, meaning to bind, restrict, enclose, and protect. This is where much of the truth lies, in symbolism and sacredness, for both are binding and surrendering to something being passed down. There is no truth that the taking of the bread and wine at the Eucharist ritual is actually the body and blood of Jesus Christ. No, the act is symbolic and solemnly reminds the religious initiate of the fact that he is part of a greater Christian brotherhood, that he is accepting Christ, and that his body was broken and blood spilt for us is a continuation of a long line. Whatever one's opinion on that religious act, the fact remains that it is a very powerful tool for reminding the masses of their place in the world via an act that is emotionally strong. This is a manipulating tradition kept alive to keep the sheep in the fold. As we can now see, tradition can be a very strong device when allied to emotion, and psychologists have discovered that allegorical tales are very often absorbed better than any literal telling. In this allegorical or symbolic respect, there are other words that also relate and of which we should take note. These words now often hold mystery to us because we have lost the meaning of them, as we have all too often lost the meaning of tradition. Myth, fable, tale, story. All of these and more are used in the traditional way to pass on hidden or esoteric knowledge from one generation to another. And this is a tradition going back in time for thousands of years. It is the custom of the storyteller whose job it was to keep alive the truths of the tribe. From the medicine man and the shaman to Druid, Brahmin, and later Catholic priest, we have entrusted our social history and religious emotional beliefs to the wise man of the tribe or culture. Held within the many myths, fables, tales, and stories are a great many truths awaiting the key to unlock them again. And many of these truths are symbolic codes, hiding a secret belief that the contemporary religious authority would have looked down upon. We have to understand our ancestors were able to do this, and we have to start by realizing that they were humans just like us. They had fears, hopes, and struggled to survive, to comprehend their very place in the universe. In the depth of understanding, our ancestors discovered that they needed to find a way of passing on the knowledge they had uncovered, and they formed tales. Our historical friends were not simple folk as we are led to believe. They had the same brain size as ourselves, and in fact, in many ways, were better attuned to the thing we now divisively call nature. You see, in our modern materialistic state, we forget that we are human beings who have come from and live in the natural universe. We forget because we create things from within our own imaginations and surround ourselves with them. And hence we find ourselves in an imaginary world of things. It is this ability of the mind to create a concept that has spawned stories and tales, myths and fables, to explain to each new generation the knowledge of the last. And so, what is the key we need to understand these concepts? It is imagination in tune with intuition, or our connection to nature. These incredible and intuitive traditions emerged from early man and his understanding of the world around him and how he survived. Settlements became trading posts for vast quantities of goods, and demarcation of roles emerged with blacksmiths, farmers, potters, and all manner of other roles. Trading went on like this for millennia, with the priesthood often controlling the process and growing in power themselves as their own communities prospered. They would take a percentage of the produce and offer it to the gods in order to maintain the weather and good fortune of the tribe. The greatest of gods, the sun, would be worshipped and aided in its journey to reappear the following day. It was the giver of life and the destroyer. It mirrored the duality in the mind of man himself, and so we formed in his likeness. We were solar beings, formed and given life by the power of the golden orb, and nothing became more important than ensuring its daily and yearly cycles. The priests of the great power were the alpha males, the medicine men or shaman of earlier times. It was they who gave authority to the king or pharaoh, who himself must be the son of the sun on earth. He was the marketing tool of the priesthood, and history was awash with the violent downfalls of the solar king when he stepped out of line and upset the priesthood. Markets emerged near or even in temples and bustled with people and produce of the wider world. Social commerce also emerged as priesthoods shared or traded knowledge with other cultures, and soon belief systems across vast continents had little to set them apart. Much of this knowledge or tradition was very important and of value to the community, and involved knowledge of astrology and astronomy to enable them to predict the seasons and for navigation. As the power base or trade grew, so the ability to navigate became extremely important, and as the majority of the population had forgotten how to do this, it emerged as a special knowledge guarded closely by the elite. Control of the trading markets, both of the land upon which it was carried out and the navigation required to operate it, grew so powerful over time that the priesthood would do almost anything to maintain control. This is why much religious literature is awash with rules and regulations for trade and commerce. The system of trading eventually needed organizing differently because of lies. It all began because of deceit, and it remains pretty much the same today. At the market, a thing called a promise emerged, whereby a man trading a goat for a pig would promise to bring his goat the following market day, only to fail in his promise. The priesthood or leader who controlled the process realized that some new system was needed to come into play, and so created money, from the word monere, meaning to warn. This new money was very cleverly based upon the gods themselves, adding incredible weight and fear to the promise. Gold was manifestly the solar divinity, the sun, and silver was the lunar deity, a mirror of the sun. Handing over a symbolic representation of the gods was a powerful promise, and the gods would know if you reneged on your promise. The church itself backed the promise, and so became the bank. Power was well and truly in the hands of the few, and the rest of us simply had no choice but to conform. This situation is almost unchanged, and today many banks are at least still partly owned by various churches, not least of which is the Catholic Church. Today our lives are run by money more than ever, and we have no choice but to live in the world of commerce. Every day we hand over our images of the solar deities, which are no longer even real gold, but instead are promises of gold. There are more promises of gold in the world than there is gold, and so the system, created because of lies and deceit, is itself a total lie. But it is the system we live in, and individually we must make our own decisions on how to do so. But there is more deception than we know, and it is to these deceptions that we must now turn. From the moment we wake up to the moment we fall asleep, we are subjects of a massive machine. We are plugged in like a light that is only alive and lit by the machine, and because of this, we no longer know how to shine for ourselves. But many do not realize that the machine, in fact, feeds from us, using our energy to capture and grow the machine that in turn captures more and more people hourly. We are all slaves to the machine in one way or another. We have seen how money enslaved us because of the lie and deceit of man, and how power was built and maintained by the few over the many. Today it is the driving force of society. Every single one of us must sell something to get money. Whether we sell our skills, services, products, or even our very soul, we all must constantly sell to earn. And because everybody is selling to everybody else, we also buy and buy. In our overpopulated world, full of people who no longer know the skills of basic survival, we must buy the basic products such as food and even water. But man has used this unique imagination to make better and more imaginative food and water, or so we believe. In fact, we dress up the ordinary and use our own natural psychology to convince others that this added value is worth the extra money. We place a clever label on a bottle of water, add mystique, and then charge a ridiculous amount of money for what is basically a free product of the earth that we can no longer have access to as individuals because of the society we have created. We do the same for all manner of goods. In addition to this, we also create products or services that we do not need, and again add value or perception that we want to buy into. In order to understand how we are led down this path, we must see into the mind of the marketing man. Many marketing men will tell you that they need to understand the product or service in depth. This is true only in the sense that the marketing man needs to know to whom the product has to be sold. He defines the primary market sector and then secondary sectors, and very often will have multiple level campaigns. Let's take an example. let's assume we need to sell a product to children. There are a great many ways to market, but our purpose here is to see how we as humans are manipulated into action or sometimes inaction. To sell to children, sometimes we may need to go through the desires and perceptions of the parents. However, let's assume that we are targeting the children themselves. Firstly, we have to assume a product, and for this simple illustration, let's assume a new candy bar. In the first place, we have to make sure the packaging is right. Our inner desire to eat candy is in fact perfectly natural and is based upon the need for fruit, which of course feeds the body's need for vitamins and glucose. Unfortunately, the candy bar overfeeds us sugar and not glucose or vitamins, and so defeats the object, and in fact simply leaves us craving more because the body, firstly, is not getting what it needs, and secondly, there are often chemicals within the bar that are addictive, both short and long term. So, with this knowledge of marketing, man simply dresses the candy bar up to look like fruit or whatever natural product or part of our diet it is replacing. In addition to this, there is the hormone process which must be taken into account. Humans produce different levels of hormones. When we are younger, our natural drives and desires are stronger and more acute. This means that when we are younger, we are more primary, and so primary colors, shapes, and sounds and smells are used. This is, of course, a generalization, and not every individual is the same, and this is indicative of how we are all placed into boxes throughout our lives, creating more unnatural states of existence and distancing us yet further from our own intuition. The marketing man's statistical data does in fact reveal that the use of primary devices on children and young adults consistently delivers good results. The reverse of this is often true of the elderly, who prefer more pastel colors and softer shapes and sounds. We can see then in this simple demonstration how we can again fall into the traps of lies and deceit by our own hormones, desires, and drives, and the manipulation of the machine. This manipulation has been in existence for thousands of years, and mankind, from the priesthood to the state, has learned how to use this to control us. The common folk of Europe, who were kept humble and illiterate for generations, were fed mass propaganda in stained glass windows and with the pageantry of state occasions. All of this and more fed the story chosen by the elite few to the masses, and the masses absolved themselves of responsibility by following. The next element of our marketing man must include a thing known as a branding device. This is not necessarily a corporate identity, as corporations have many products and each one must have its own branding identity. If we take our fictional candy bar, it may very well carry the corporate logo, which is a symbol of the corporation. This can add value to the product if the corporation has a strong identity and can pull upon the emotions of the individual purchasing the product with a tribal sense of loyalty, brand, or corporate loyalty. This is the exact same as loyalty to the church or state, and again absolves the individual of responsibility for what he is eating or indeed feeding to his children. This absolution is false, as we all hold responsibility for our own actions. Just because X corporation is big and has been around for a long time does not mean that it is perfect. Far from it. The corporation is still run by humans out for greed and growth. The emotions and ties to the corporation must therefore be ones of trust in the corporation and its products. Any corporation that loses this trust factor is on a slippery slope and will have to go through a period of self-recreation in the marketplace to reestablish itself or even rebrand itself. One thing corporations, states, and religions fear the most is the powerful word of mouth, which spreads bad news via gossip like wildfire. This is the power of the individual against the control of the few, and is one reason that corporations attempt to appear under a disguise and therefore independent on the internet. Once we have a strong corporate identity, we must then brand the candy bar dependent upon the selected market's place. Some candy bars are in fact retro-branded to attract both children and a sense of history and tradition embedded in the older generations, allowing the person to recapture their youth, a time always emotionally charged and often imaginary. The branding of a product will go through a series of market tests with a specially selected group and results collated. This may happen several times, but in each case, the marketing man will be looking for emotional results. This all pulls upon our deepest desires, and nothing is stronger than the utilization of emotions. Religion, politics, and corporate greed have used emotional responses for a long time. In the end, marketing is about the psychology of man, and whoever best understands the mind of man will succeed in the financial stakes. Once the product has been branded and packaged according to all these criteria and more, the next step in the game is to convince the general public and the specific marketing sector to purchase the product, and in order to do this, we have developed a very simple structure that utilizes our own psychology. In the end, the whole process reveals how easy it can be with this special knowledge to take from another. Create a dream and then sell it, and nobody realizes that they are in fact buying into exactly that, a dream from within the mind of another. It is not reality, if indeed we can decide on what reality truly is anymore. It is not needed. It is just desired because of our bastardized social norm and position. We pay more for water in a fancy bottle than the worth of both the bottle and the water, and all because it may have a classy French-sounding name. This water is shipped thousands of miles to get to your door, when all along there is water almost everywhere on this planet. We pay a fortune for a ready-prepared plastic bag full of salad produce that meets with our modern lifestyles, whilst all along we fill our gardens with plastic lights, barbecues, and pretty plastic flowers. In parallel with this, people starve in the third world. What is reality? Ask a starving child and see if it is the same as your own perception. Our reality is not true reality. It is not needed because of its self-perpetuating a massive lie. We all have dreams and sell them to others, and we then end up believing them ourselves, and before anybody realizes it, we are all living in a dream world that simply does not exist. Billions of children around the world are being fed non-realities by computer games. They live out their precious lives in a world that is not real, whilst mom and dad spend their every waking moment battling and selling to pay for the products of the delusional world. This causes yet more division within each mind, but also within the family unit. And because all of this is an illusion, not one of them is truly fulfilled, and so the family eventually breaks down, and division in the form of divorce often occurs. The child is only being prepared for one thing: a life of exactly the same as his parents, a treadmill of buy and sell and lack of self-knowledge. Instead of learning the simple basic skills of life and love, children today are taught to manipulate the illusionary world of computer screens, moving imaginary characters around, killing and maiming the enemy, which is normally some politically propagandized evil role model. Most people do not realize the incredible amounts of money made from the multi-million-dollar worlds of illusion. But they also don't realize the propaganda content is immense. In fact, there are many games strategically funded by governments and other agenda-driven authorities and organizations that are specifically written to train the minds of the youth into particular ways of thinking. This then creates masses of controllable young adults for the financial war machine and good voters who are now loyal to the cause. We are all pawns in a game that has gone out of control, because it is a life spent in an illusionary world with nobody specifically controlling it anymore. Now we have a world of technology that is overtaking us, and we have to somehow try to keep our heads wrapped around the lightning speed with which it moves. There are even extensions to the computer game dream world, allowing us to take this world of illusion with us anywhere we go. There is no escaping the phenomenon, because the human tribal instinct to be as good or better than everybody else and to be accepted in our society forces us to participate. In addition, there are new ways for the marketing man to catch us, because they now buy advertising space in the illusionary world of the computer game. So even the marketing man is being sold an illusion, a billboard in the land of illusion. Advertising billboards in a fake downtown city carries the same old messages that we subconsciously buy into. We are lying to ourselves in a world of lies, and we only have ourselves to blame. We kill ourselves to afford to buy a product we don't need at an inflated price because of advertising costs of billboards in a land that doesn't exist. Stand back and think about how stupid this all is, and then think about the eyes of a starving child. How does it make you feel? And so technology, like everything else we humans create, is truly an extension of ourselves, covering up the real mess we are in. The truth is that the technology we created with all good intentions is now driving us, and we have become extensions of that machine itself. These leaps in technology are part and parcel of the human evolutionary cycle, from the flint spear to the space shuttle. We cannot stop them, but we ought to be aware of their effects on the human mind. Before we realized it, technology had transformed the office beyond all recognition with word processing, design, and of course the internet and email. Everybody had to speed up, and now the truly successful alpha people multitask, using more than one technology at a time just to keep up and stay alpha dominant, and of course to earn more of that illusionary money. The system is now beyond human nature. We have created a monster, a Frankenstein, and we have lost ourselves. The lesson to learn is that just like the Frankenstein monster, it is a mirror of ourselves, and it is destroying the very essence of who we are. All of this is why, even now in the 21st century, we remain stupid humans who constantly battle with each other because we are forcing ourselves away further and further from the truth of what we really are. We have created a world of imagination in which we can live out a dream life, and to pay for it, we live in hell. Today we have a divided world created by the divided mind of man, which simply wishes to go back to the one. It is consciousness arguing with the unconscious world that is causing this division, for the facts speak for themselves. We are not separate from the universe in which we reside. The truth is that we can cure our own madness ourselves. All we need is strength, will, and knowledge. We can take these three words and use them to better ourselves by seeking balance in our lives. We are all positive and negative, and we constantly cycle between them. The true understanding will only be found in the point between these cycles, in a neutral stasis, and it's in this state that people find greater understanding, artistic expression, and calm. How do we do this? It is simple and yet seemingly a million miles away from where we are. Every element of your past needs to be understood to be in the past. It is not with you now, unless you make it so. The future, too, need not be worried about, for worry causes conflict and chaos and tips the balance. Both the past and the future are poles, and if we live in either, then we are again dividing our mind. To live now is an anagram of own, and it is time that we owned our own lives and stopped shuffling responsibility for ourselves, beliefs, actions, etc. on other times, let alone people, states, and religions. This balancing of the extremes and finding the place between is multi-leveled and works on all things in our lives. If we all applied this balance, then we would all be happier and more content, but we would have to apply it to every level of our lives. This, like gravity, would affect those people around us and cause a more balanced society. So too, if we are chaotic and unbalanced, then we would cause more division in others. Influence is itself a good benchmark. How we are influencing others. We can cause all kinds of cycles around us, from influencing a cycle in our children with simple things like swearing, to influencing them with love, balanced with discipline. All of this is true for society at large, too. Francis Bacon, the 16th century writer and once Lord Chancellor of England, said that no matter how good your intentions may be, if you don't have the right knowledge, then you will be like a dry fountain, useless. We must show willingness to improve, but begin in small ways and improve ourselves first before attempting to impact others. You see, we are all really to blame for the current state of affairs, for the environment, for feeding antidepressant drugs to children, for our own psychosis. Each one of us knowingly uses other people to feed our own self-propelled delusional state. For instance, we all know beyond a doubt that Hollywood stars are ordinary human beings, and yet we also know that a lot of them are not happy. Drink, drugs, and debt are more often than not the only outcome. Suicide rates increase. Children are brought up in the most insane, delusional, and illusionary world outside of the Vatican, and this cycle repeats. Out of every star who supposedly makes it big, there are not hundreds, not thousands, but millions of people who struggle to pay their rent while serving coffee. But these millions delude themselves with the dream of the few, and in this they lose themselves. In today's world, there are millions of battles fought daily between marketing men and advertisers, producers and directors, radio hosts and designers, all scrambling around finding the latest and most advanced method of producing an experience for the people to grab their attention, keep their interest, and form desires leading to actions. Alas, the actions required now are more often than not to spend our money or move us to vote one way or another. They are manipulations of the brain that is not thinking for itself and therefore will do as it is told. This is why images, sound, and feel are all created for us by the corporate giants, so that we don't have a chance to think for ourselves and therefore follow like lemmings, however subtly this may be. Escape is so easy and yet so difficult. It is easy to say and yet harder to do. The first dilemma is, how do we even become aware that we are in fact caught in a trap? There are a great many who know all about the trap and yet are happy within it. There is no difference to the film The Matrix, whereby Neo has to decide whether to take the pill that will free him from his dream world state once and for all. People are simply happy not to have to work the brain, especially when everything is done for them. Others, like Neo, see that the reality of freedom is much more liberating for the mind. Most, if not all, revolutions of mankind's history have been caused by one man or a few men finding freedom and then passing it on to others. They suddenly see, as if in a flash of light, that they have been oppressed by their leaders. Often in the light of our modern minds, these historical oppressions seem obvious to us now. But at the time it was not so, because the people were living in the cage and not outside of it. Once the rabbit is out of the cage, the freedom sighted spreads like wildfire, and all the rabbits start gnawing. Today, billions of humans exist on this planet of ours, and it is growing by the day. We are storing up and creating a human bomb that will one day explode inwardly or outwardly as a result of the oppressive nature of our media and capitalist-led system. There is no difference to why Russia exploded with the Red Revolution or why the French rose up against the oppressive royalty. Islam uses this scenario as a tool to beat the West and would only replace it with another form of oppression in the form of the written word, the Quran. It seems that no matter which period of history we wish to look at, the same forms of oppression and dumbing down have been utilized extensively, whether by government, religion, or royalty. But what can we do to escape this living matrix? The first thing to know is thyself. This self is trapped in the unconscious world, forced downwards by the conscious world of mankind. Our brain has a function that closes down unnecessary perceptions. We may be subconsciously aware of these things, but only to send messages to the unconscious world, and often for defense. For instance, we may always be listening out for threats, but the unconscious world is aware of all this, works with it, is driven itself by the forces of nature. The conscious world cannot cope and closes down perceptions. This is why dumbing down humanity works so well, because we all have so much to think about and do. There are just too many things for us all to concentrate on, so we entrap ourselves in the less sensory world, alleviating our minds of the pressure. But this is a false answer to the conundrum. because by allowing our minds to close off even more, we in fact are able to deal with less and less until eventually we are no better than caged rabbits. The conscious mind needs expansion by feeding it good food that teaches it to cope with the expansion and allows it to be one with the unconscious world, in tune with nature and the force of nature. Once we have understood this, we can begin to find ourselves under the conscious realm. We need to sit calmly and open our perceptions to the person we are and not who we are told to be or try to be. I am not the many people I revere and adore. I am me, and I am part of the natural force. I do not need another man to imagine my world for me or draw pictures in place of the written word. I have my own imagination and powerful thoughts that can discover the links or archetypes within my unconscious realm. Give me the real and full story. Don't patronize me. Give me something useful and fulfilling, not how to become a supermodel or race car driver. Let us be part of nature once again and stop fighting it with our silly ways. You never know. We may, in fact, find that we enjoy the freedom.